Hi and welcome to genealogyhangout.com. My name's Fiona and I'm the founder of genealogy.com, and I welcome you to this session. Whether you are viewing the video, listening to the podcast, or just reading about this session, I hope you enjoy it. Now, this is about census today. What is it and how to use it? Now, I'm assuming that you've already watched the last couple of information sessions that I've had and you've started researching your family. So one of the great tools that we have available is the census. Now, many countries have used a census to find out about their population, and I'm going to explain all about that right now. So most of them have been held decennial, and that's every 10 years. Be aware as a beginner, however, that you don't assume that just because you found someone with your name that you're researching, that you're related to them. That's probably a big no-no. So what you need to do is gather the information and get even more information that you can check back with, and make sure that you find other members of the family that you're aware of. There may be some naming patterns, and you can cross-check that with other certificates and other verified information. Remember that we've already covered birth certificates and registration and marriage certificates and registration, so you need to do that. Now, in the UK in particular, you might find some family that live in a very grand home. Now, be aware that they could well be domestic staff working for the family and not the noble family themselves. So in the UK, I'm going to cover the UK, the US and Australia. In the UK, the census started from 1801, and they were every 10 years from then. So it's 1801, 1811, 1821, 1831. Now, they only counted the head of the family, so there wasn't much other information for you. So from 1841 to 1911, there's lots and lots of information. All of those census are indexed and they are available online. So you should be able to find a great run, but that doesn't always happen. So persist, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how to find those tricky people in the next episode. So stay tuned. And the census in England, there was no census in 1941 because of World War II. The country was under bombardment and nothing happened that year. The 1931 census was destroyed by fire in 1942 due to bombing on London, and all the others are available after 2022. That would be the 1921 census. After the 1911 census, there was a 100-year rule that passed for privacy of the people's information. So the next one available will be 2022. So that's a little while yet. So that was the UK. Moving on to the US. Now, the US had their first census just after the American Revolution. In 1790 was the first, and the last one that they had was in 2010. So they've just had one a few years ago. Their next one is in 2020, and they were pretty much population census from 1790. But after 1840 to 1850, all the members of the households were named in the census. And in the 1851 was the first slave schedule, which originated in 1850, with the second and the last slave schedule in 1860. So between 1850 and 1880, lifespans and causes of death were recorded, and that seems pretty useful Now, the latest census for the US is 1940. That became available on the 1st of April 2012. And that's available under the 72-year rule. So in the US, they have a 72-year rule. All of the others will become available every 10 years from the 1st of April 2012. So the next one is the 1st of April 2022, and that will be the 1950 census. The 1960 census will be available in 2032, 1970 in 2042, and the 1980 in 2052. So I hope I'm around for that one yet. And from 1930, they were held from every time that they had them, they were held on the 1st of April. So that'd be a bit of an April Fool's joke, wouldn't it? And of course, a census records the people living in a particular household on that particular night. So if you were not home, you would not be at the normal address. So that can produce some interesting little tidbits to find people if they're not home. Like I said, I'll talk about that in the next episode, so stay tuned. And the census in Australia really started after Federation. Now, in Australia, we had a few states that had their own information. And in fact, the very first census was held in 1828. Now, there's a little bit of information about that. And prior to that, there were mustards that were actually held so that the officials could actually work out if there was enough food to actually feed everyone in the country. So you've got to remember that when we started in Australia, it was based on a penal colony. And they needed to make sure that they had sufficient food for all the people that were here. And it got pretty tight at times, but that's another story. So the census in Australia started from 1901 and really went to 1911, 1921, 1931, 1941, 1951 and 1961. So they were every 10 years. But then after 1961, there was a change and they started doing a census every 5 years. So that information isn't available at the moment. In Australia, we have a 100-year rule. And in fact, up until about 10 years ago, all the census information, once it was actually collated, was destroyed. Sad but true. So 10 years ago, the Australian government actually gave people a choice whether or not their information was kept for 100 years and then released to the public. So in 2104, I think it is, my information, or 2105, can't remember now, but my personal information will be released to the public, but my partners and my daughters won't. They chose not to release it. So that's a little bit sad from the family historian point of view, but that's how it goes. So with the Australian census, we had one, there was an 1828 one that I've mentioned, and there was another census in 1881, and that was actually tied up with the UK census at the time. The only problem was that the census schedule in each state was different, so when they actually tried to put it all together, they couldn't really make it work. So they had to make sure in 1901, because the census was taken just after Federation, that the census schedule was actually uniform in each state, and that actually happened. So just recapping, the UK, US and Australia all have census information that you can use. Don't forget to use it, and I'll teach you some tips and tricks in the next video, and see you then. Cheers for now. Bye.